Hello, my name is Peter Schiffman. Today is the 12th of February, 2026. This is a continuation of my journey to find recovery, thereby finding hope. Tomorrow morning, I will be 2 weeks post-surgery of an ACD-F, anterior cervical discectomy, decompression, and fusion in 2 locations of my cervical spine, C5 to 6 and 6 to 7. I say that because my limbic system in my brain was so damaged by the traumatic brain injury and 3 hemorrhagic brain bleeds that I have various types. I can't remember the word. It's something to do with the inability to remember things. It will come to me eventually. But there's that word. The word when you don't remember things, you just forget everything. It'll come to me. I have no short-term memory, the inability to place anything in long-term memory, and I have themes and vibes about the past, but no specific memories. I have tried to think of the last day I remember working as a registered nurse, as a nurse supervisor, where I had worked for about 25 years, and in my 38th year as a psychiatric nurse clinician, or in New York State Office of Mental Health System, my title was nurse supervisor. Most of my nursing career in every aspect of adult child forensics, addictions, research, inpatient, outpatient, psychiatry, I have worked or been exposed to all aspects, and throughout my entire career and the 16 years I spent as a volunteer in every role and aspect and title for NAMI New York City, Staten Island, the things that I did learn in both my professional and volunteer lives were, you have to keep hope alive. My entire life before was focused around mental illness and those types of brain disorders. I used to refer to my podcast as an extension of my volunteer work with NAMI Staten Island. The podcast I did run for almost a decade, and it was too expensive to maintain with the hosting packages I paid for. But what I was doing was interviewing people with lived with experience, family members, and fellow clinicians who had some insight or some knowledge to share that could somehow, some way, provide at least a glimmer of hope. Everything I say, the words I use now, they're much more limited than they were prior to suffering a traumatic brain injury on 17 September 2024. What should have been a random day at work as a nurse supervisor was sadly the last day of my career, and the day my life was so destroyed that on that day, when I was brought over to Northwell and admitted to the surgical ICU for 14 days on a ventilator in a medically induced coma with pneumonia. That last day of my career was also the day my ego died and most of my identity and any sense of a future. But I am a complex person. I was previously neurodivergent with ADHD, inattentive type, and major depression for my entire life. On various antidepressants with different psychiatrists for over 30 years. In treatment with stimulants for the ADHD inattentive type, or ADD, or type 2, or whatever you want to call it, for about 14 years. And that was always a trial and error thing, to find medication that might work but might not have too many interactions or side effects. Yes, during my nursing career, I was obsessive about certain things, and that could be typical of a person who's neurodivergent, such as me. But the things I deep dove into and had to learn everything about all had a common theme. There was always a consistency to the things I poured myself into to learn everything I could. That commonality was that it was possibly something that could help someone find a life worth living. That is a line I remember hearing the past executive director of NAMI Staten Island say one time to me. I don't know what happened to my hippocampus and amygdala that day. I was bleeding in my brain and had to be put on a vent, but I just know so much of my memory and parts of me and my identity were just erased. Yet, certain situations, conversations, things I can remember, a handful of things. And I can even say who said it. I'm not sure exactly when, but that's how important it was to me. It stuck with me. Some of the things I've heard in my time in every aspect with NAMI, New York City, Staten Island, those come back to me sometimes when I need them. When I need support so much, because I've been there and I am there and I'm trying to get away from there. What I mean is suffering, loss, pain, trauma, altogether, it is not a competitive sport by any means. But if it was, I would be a gold medalist. I will say that my perspective on everything has completely changed. Certain things in the past I felt very strongly about. There are certain things now I still feel strongly, only increasingly so. For certain things I feel so passionately enthusiastic about. I have gratitude, because pain can kill, but pain can also propel a person to do something, and do something good, do public good, make a difference for others who suffer in silence. For those who are victimized by assumptions, meaning, if you have never met me and you don't know me at all, look at me. What do you see? I'm a 59-year-old white guy from Staten Island, a third-generation Staten Islander. What do you see? Now, your mind might assume, well, Staten Island, there's a lot of people that are kind of racist or ignorant or whatever. Maybe he's one of them. I have no lawyer and I have no lawsuit and I am on nobody's payroll. I have nothing to sell, nothing to preach. And there are a couple of things that I have unexpectedly developed an immunity to. One is intimidation. Two, manipulation. Either approaches would be wasted energy on me. I have become unexpectedly immune to those both. From being at the absolute outer limits of extremes of human survival. Being in survival mode for so long, desperate, just to try to not die, it changes a person. Suffering inhuman levels of pain that makes you want to just give up and throw it away and be impulsive. I am familiar with that, having reached that threshold of tolerance in April of 2025. It wasn't until August, late August of 25, when I had finally submitted so much pain and loss and trauma. It was a combination of staggering pain to move, which I have had surgery 2 weeks ago, but the levels of pain and mixed with the ideas that I absolutely deserved it. I deserved to suffer and rot and die. Those false ideas grew in my head along with PTSD. And I have obsessively considered and deep dove to figure out why, when, where did this happen? I remember the night my PTSD was born and any right I had at all to exist, that was gone that night afterwards. And for months I stood in a dark room sobbing silently, protecting my family, waiting for my heart to stop or to have a fourth hemorrhagic or whatever. I believed I deserved it. I have somehow punched through those false ideas, and I do not absolutely and will not in any way complete suicide. I say it like that because I have always been a mandated reporter, and I was a suicide prevention and harm reduction trainer of trainers. That was then. Now, I'm more so. I don't want anyone to know things I have known in the past year. And for the person who is so alone and so frightened and terrified, but they're keeping it all in right until the end. I don't want that for you or anyone. The invisible syndrome and suffering in silence. I have been victimized by it, and I have also stood and hid with insane ideas in my head that were all put there by people. Now, Maintaining an absolute rigid control of my impulses is essential. Because I believe the average person, if they knew my story, they would think to themselves, wow, I would kill somebody. I can't believe it. For me, having mastered the art or the curse of wearing a mask and hiding how I'm feeling, since a young boy with ADHD, I learned how to make nothing show. There was no physical behavior or anything that would ever indicate a message other than whatever I said. I have mastered invisibility. And I was invisible for much of my life because that is what I intended. I chose that. I never exaggerated or took credit for anything, for any of the things I have done for others. And it was more than just being humble, and it was from self-loathing. Lessons learned, mistakes made. Here I am, after an otherwise fatal traumatic brain injury, and now 16 months later I have ACD-F surgery, which I wanted for over a year, but for a combination of reasons I suffered, right down to 120-something pounds of nothing. One is because of New York State Insurance Fund workers' comp. I have some questions and some issues. I'll address those in person when I get there. The other was me hating myself half to death because everything seemed wrong. For someone who had just survived a traumatic brain injury on a ventilator where the staff said it was a miracle I woke up after being extubated, to then be traumatized and treated like a piece of garbage when I needed it and I was vulnerable, to have healthcare people turn around and accuse me and confront me. It's not what was done to me in October or November of 2024. It's what I did to myself after, believing, because everything was opposite of what I believed and felt in my heart before my traumatic brain injury. So with the absence of emotional capability, I focused my anger and rage onto myself, almost into the ground. But on the day I surrendered, that's when it happened. It's when I changed so much. I became a spiritual person, a Unitarian. I was previously Jewish, according to my driver's license, but I was raised in Catholic Church and married in Catholic Church. Everything changed. I have benefited when I really needed it from the warmth of her loving embrace. I want that for others, for anyone suffering, for anyone who deep down believes they have no right to exist, that there's some sort of broken piece of abomination garbage. That's how I viewed myself for close to a year after being traumatized. I have gratitude to have learned and to still be here and to be awake, aware, alert, and to have the insight to know that not everyone needs to know everything. It's why I haven't been all over social media ranting and raving. I am a man time forgot. My hippocampus, amygdala, trashed. I don't know. I have no sense of executive functioning or planning or super ultra ADD, whatever. But a combination of my remaining cognitive abilities with mostly my discipline, which I shock myself sometimes. I didn't know I could do it. But when you have to do it, you either do or you don't. And I choose to. I choose to do more than just survive. I've been trying to just survive for so many months now. I think it's time to start living. Openly, honestly, and authentically. And I want to live by example. I have always been a student of life and behavior. In some ways, I was a behavioral analyst of sorts, especially after I worked in forensics. But it's not that I'm somewhat of a human lie detector and definitely a suffering detector. If someone shows me anything that's familiar to myself, if I see that fear and uncertainty in someone's eyes, because I have stood there on a street corner thinking, do I remember this? Because I'm not feeling like a person. Do I remember this? If I see that look of fear in someone else, what I will do is just be present and say hello. By opening a door to communication, I don't push, I just make it available. Not only because I've been a psychiatric nurse clinician for close to 40 years, and an EMT instructor, and a peer facilitator and past president of NAMI Staten Island. It's because it has always been very personal to me as a lifelong empath. Having accelerated through many stages of aging and death and dying, thinking I have to prepare and process as if I'm my own 988 crisis counselor and my own hospice nurse, and I can't be all those things for myself, and no one should either. Change starts at home, and honesty and communication starts at home with yourself. For anyone who is a clinician or training to be or person living with any type of brain disorder, my position is this. If you are trying to learn something and think maybe my particular perspective on things could be intriguing and you would ask this question, that question, my attitude is, ask me. Ask me. I have no secrets, nor will I just blurt things out. I respect privacy, and I respect people, and I respect that everyone is important and everyone matters. Not just the very wealthy, connected people. Those of us who are vulnerable and disabled and need care, compassion. We are not weak. We are some of the strongest people alive.